But I truly do believe what I took away from that place is definitely universal. Today, tomorrow, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, people do want to hear good music.
All right, so today is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Who are we speaking with?
My name is Brian Cook. Uh,
AKA B.
I don't want to give you short answers. So if you're asking who I am, do you want to know who I am and why am I here, or just who am I?
Yeah, exactly. Like give me the long answer. So the framework is one, give me long answers, and two, stories work best. So when I ask you about like the Loft, don't say like it was on Prince Street or whatever. That's cool, but like tell me a story behind it. Like I saw like Michael Jackson dancing with Madonna, or you know what I mean. So you know the deal. So
Well, I'm Brian Cook. I am going way back. Well, I'm from New York City, born and raised, and I was introduced to the club scene mostly through the Loft. And I hung out in places like the Loft, Garage, and such back in that period in time. And I've come back and forth with underground dance scenes and clubs and stuff, and over the course of time. I've taken breaks along the way, so to speak. But it's all kind of part of like this long journey of music and New York culture and such that that I was lucky enough to have grown up there and given the opportunity to go to some of these places and spend time with some of the people on the scene, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a life that I'm grateful for, and one that I'm still connected to this day.
what does the Loft mean to you?
What does the Loft mean to me? I don't know if I can give you any kind of synopsis of like a concise definition of what the Loft is. There's so much about what it is. There are so many facets to it. Obviously, I have my own perspectives, what I saw, what I experienced, and what I took away from it. One thing it means to me is that it's many things for many people, and that it's certainly about perspective. It's one of the things I appreciate what you do here, because I believe that history is in the composite. It's not in a singular recollection of what transpired over a period of time. I only have one set of eyes, one set of ears, one body, and one consciousness. So as far as what it means for me, I'll say, well, first of all, I never heard of it. I never heard of the Loft. I was still relatively young when I found out about it. And
Actually, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us about the first time you heard about it and went to the Loft, and paint us a picture? What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? What did you experience? What did you feel? Tell us about that. Start there.
Got you. Well, up until that point in time, I had very limited experience. I've been to maybe about a half dozen parties at grown-up clubs. I had just come of age. I wasn't quite legal for drinking or anything like that, so I really didn't have that much experience. I came to dance music through roller skating, so via the Roxy. And then as I became old enough to start going out to parties and stuff, I went to a few other places. And then I was just hanging out in my neighborhood with my best friend and a mutual acquaintance of ours, somebody we were friendly with. We got into a conversation with him, and he said, "Hey, there's this party. It's something I think you guys would really like. You should come check it out." So we had time that weekend. We were down for it. We were looking for a great party. It would be a fantastic thing to do. And we met up that night, and he was kind of psyched about it, but in retrospect, I'm thinking to myself, he probably was tamping down the energy. He didn't want to over push it a bit. After the fact, he was like, "Yeah, see, it was pretty amazing, wasn't it?" But at any rate, we met up that evening and we headed down to Soho to, we walked down. I lived in Chelsea. I grew up in a projects in the Chelsea neighborhood in Manhattan. So for me, the Loft was always a walk-to experience. It was never a subway. It was never a taxi, or rarely those things. It was always something that I could just throw my gear on, walk out of my house, and head there, which came in handy for things like blizzards, and such. When other people maybe were banned, I could get there. So we walked down and, just having our fun, heading on down there. As we get down there, there's a small crowd of people out front. Not many.
Which location was this?
This is at Prince and Mercer. Most of my experience was Prince and Mercer. By the time I came along, which was in 1980, it was established. The party was going full strength by that period in time. The transition from Broadway up to Prince Street was done. They were where they were meant to be by that stage of the game. And it was, it was Soho. So they were like, all of the typical Soho type people in restaurants and all that other stuff as we're walking and we're heading to this place. And at first I was a little surprised that this underground party was going to be amongst these people. But then as we started to push a little bit further over to what at that period in time was still maybe a little bit industrial, a little bit more, it was a combination. It was the people at that point in time was still living in lofts and buildings that weren't meant for housing. They were still warehouse buildings that these people were on these great rent controlled situations. So at any rate, long story short, we get to this small crowd of people out front. I forget who was working the door, but the bouncer was there and everyone was friendly. It was all upbeat and stuff like that. And we head up the steps. Well, first of all, the steps. So like, I'm sure many people have spoken about the Prince Street location on these various accounts. It's now a clothing store, of course, and the downstairs is now a restaurant. But they had these old cast iron steps, and the sidewalk itself, half of the sidewalk is concrete. The other half of the sidewalk was vaulted, meaning that underneath that was open space, which was actually part of the building. So the basement of the building extended out like about 8 to 10 feet underneath the sidewalk. And all of those sections were covered by a cast iron plate with round holes in them that had glass lenses. So when you come up to the building, there, of course, is the staircase, and then you see light coming out of the floor. Walked up the steps, head inside, and Penny was sitting there. I'm not sure if you've heard the name Penny, but Penny was a good friend of David's, and she more often than not was the person at the book, person that greeted you, person who gave you love and kindness when you showed up at the place. And everyone was happy. From the minute you walk in, everyone's happy. Anyone who's looking at you is greeting you. Hey, how you doing? Welcome, blah, blah, blah. You go up to the book. My friend, showed his little membership card, said these people were with me, and we go in. There was a little kind of a ticket taker booth that you walk past. So you bear right. Behind the wall that Penny's sitting in front of is the main floor. There's a couple of doors over here to the right. Then there's Penny at a table and stuff, and then you turn to the right, and there's an old ticket booth, and I forget who was in that booth, but you took a penny. You paid, I think it was 20 bucks at the time or something like that. So it was really $19.99. You took a penny and gave them your entry fee. It could have been less. It might have even been 15 when I first started going. It was just 15 or 20. And then you walk in technically. And so at that stage, there's a stairwell that goes downstairs, or you could head to the floor. Early in the evening when you get there, it was almost always David behind the turntables, by the way. Almost always David. So even though we're talking about a 13, 14-hour evening, probably average 14 maybe, he did almost all that work every night. And that meant from the very beginning. So he was playing some beautiful, like very, just beautiful soft music, nothing really that's driving. There might have been a little bit of rhythm to it, so you could stretch out to it, you could dance a little bit to it and whatnot. But the earlier portion of the evening, upstairs and downstairs, because the music was always the same. If you got there at 12, which I like to do, you went through about maybe up to an hour of low energy music, the warm up, what he would call the ascent. So you come in, you can go on the main floor, which I would often do. I'd get some stretching in, I get some open dancing in. and such, or I might just hang out and just stand in the middle of the floor and listen to the sound system because there was hardly anybody there at that time. So you had the freedom, you could just stand right there and you're undisturbed. Or I'd make it downstairs for a while. And usually things didn't really get jumping at the loft when the door opened. There would be people there, there would be some enthusiasm, there would be some really great energy there, but you know, stuff didn't really start get jumping until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. So if you're showing up at 12, you expect that. That's what it's going to be. Food doesn't get put out till later. There might be some freshmen by that point in time. And we hung out. Maybe smoked a little weed, definitely did some dancing, some stretching and stuff. So by the time, let me just tell you about the first time I went. So the first time I went, when we got downstairs, it was already getting hot and crazy. Now, you've probably heard about the basement at the loft. There's been nothing like that in other manifestations of the loft. Broadway had the one floor, it was the connected spaces, Prince and Mercer. Then you had the 3rd Street, which is a big open space, no basement, one room. Then Avenue A, which is a much smaller space. And now, of course, the Ukrainian Home, which is a relatively large room. So it was only at Prince and Mercer that the basement manifested. And the basement was, it was wild. It was wild. Even if you got there, you know, say about 1:30 or 2 already, it was going nuts. And a lot of the better dancers were down there because there's a little bit more room for them to do their stuff. And they were, and there were a lot of the other people who came downstairs weren't necessarily looking to dance. They were looking to maybe head to the bathroom, throw some water on their face, maybe get some water or some punch or whatever. So when I got there, already it was very nice. I don't know that I left the basement, but to maybe peek upstairs a couple of times. I pretty much stayed downstairs almost from the get-go, jumpstart, because I could tell that's where the dancing was. And I had a little bit of a dancing bug before I got there, you know, with the roller dancing and such. And just in general, just, you know, I was kind of fascinated with dancing. But let me tell you, man, after that first night at the loft, I had to be better. I had to get some dancing tools in my belt to hang out there, because I wanted to be a part of what I saw these people breaking off downstairs. I wanted to be, you know, like Mike Dungy and Willie and like even like Chris Karate Chris, who his stuff was more, it was very slow. It was more of an expression of martial arts than it was dancing, but I wanted to be a part of all of that stuff. And then, of course, when it got crazy, when it picked up later in the evening, and when it started, you know, when you started hitting peak time, when people are yelling and screaming and carrying on and hitting the deck and bouncing off walls and all this other stuff, I didn't know if I'd ever reach that stage, but I knew I certainly wanted to be around all that from that point forward. So it didn't take but one time for the bug to bite me. One time was all it took. I think from then until they closed Prince Street, I think I maybe missed 3 nights. So we're talking years. No blizzards, no nothing. There was nothing that stood in the way of getting there. And it wasn't like, I mean, maybe I probably would have been upset if I couldn't get there on the nights that I intended to get there. But it just felt like a positive thing. It didn't feel like some crazy junkie chasing a high or something like that. I was going to get something amazing, and you would come away with something at the end of the night too. It wasn't like you put it all out there, and when you walked out the door, there was nothing left. If anything, there was something extra that you took when you left. So, you know, when I tell people, you know, like literally, I think I missed 3 nights over years. They think, oh, that's kind of crazy. It's kind of obsessive. And in a way it kind of is, but it never really kind of felt obsessive. It felt more like an avocation than an obsession. You know, so we'll take a little break there. There's more, of course. People were amazing there. From the very beginning, and there was some warmth. You know, some people, like, if they didn't know you, they wouldn't treat you bad, but they, you know, there'd be some warmth. But you know, it's not like you were going to get bosom buddies on the first night you went there. But you could tell that there was a vibe that people were like, They were supporting your fun. I didn't read too much into it at that period in time. Later on, I kind of got the notion that they felt it was a responsibility. At the moment, I just thought it was really cool that nobody was harshing me. Nobody was judging me. No one was taking a look at me and saying, hey, this guy doesn't fit here. He's not from here. None of that. It was all people really just wanting to have fun and being happy that you're having fun. Awesome. Unlike other clubs I had been to by that point in time, where mirrors were more important. What you were wearing was more important. What you were spending was more important. And if you weren't one of the top dancers, then there was a problem. You know, people would be looking at you, you know, or, you know, giving you shade and stuff like that. And there was none of that. The culture and the environment, spiritually speaking, was drastically different than the limited experience I had in nightclubs by that point in time. And it was something I wanted that. I wanted to be able to go to a place where all that pretense was gone. Music, dance, party. That's it. That's what we're here for. And you know, during that whole time frame, I was never disappointed, dude. Never. Almost an absolute minimum of any negative energy there over all those years. I only saw one beef. I couldn't go to almost any other club and not see stuff go down. Only one beef in all that time. And it was squashed. No security. No one got hit. No, you know, there was no actual violence. There was some arguing, and people stepped in and, like, you know, basically said to them, hey, look, this is a party. This is a friendly space. We don't do that here. One time. It was a blessed place. And again, I think some people just understood this is our responsibility just as much as it is an opportunity to have this kind of space. So we have to help to maintain that. So that's it.
That was great. What's the biggest misconception about David Mancuso?
Well, let me just preface this by saying to you that I wouldn't call myself a friend of David's. I didn't know him well enough. I can count the number of times I had a conversation away from the loft on one hand with him. So there are people who surely have more insights into David. Here's one. And it's not deep. I'm not going to really get into like who David is as a person, but when I hear people recount the loft and David's choices in music, or when I hear people talk about their perception from what they've heard about David's choices in music, people put it out there like all he ever played were these great classics. And that, you know, that what David said is a classics said. That's a lie. They became classics. So he was breaking new music all the time. All the time. I hear people nowadays talk about, well, you know, I'm playing like a loft set, and they go into the playing stuff that was probably in David's, you know, catalog of records to play. But they're not playing like David. David was always breaking new music, always, and not like a little bit of music. On any given night, on any given night, you might have heard a couple of dozen songs that he had never played before. And some of them have become, you know, they're considered standards now because they were such great songs. Also, David didn't just play stuff that was deep and straight up cut from the disco dance cloth. He played pop music. I was having a conversation with some Loft people, and I'd mentioned Madonna, Everybody, that I remember hearing that at the Loft. And then I heard, oh no, he would never play that. Later on, I had other conversations where Loft heads were counted. Yes, of course, he played that song. He wasn't adverse to playing a commercial song, but he was looking, in my eyes at least, he was looking for a certain quality to that popular song before he's even going to think about playing it. He may not play it repeatedly because we had our expectations, and it was all about the energy and when it you know, what time of the evening it is and whether it's going to fit or not. But he played a lot more stuff than people would suggest that David played. And that's why, you know, when I said to you this thing about the composite, one person is not going to give you David's playlist, except maybe if they're in a room with all of those records, they can give you a lot of the playlist. But his choices were a heck of a lot more varied, and maybe not as demanding as some people might be as far as looking for musical excellence and musical acuity and such. Sometimes he played a fun song just because it was fun. And would he continue to be playing that record later in the year, next year, and so forth? Maybe not. Maybe it was good enough just for the moment. So that would, for me at least, that would be, you know, one thing I think a lot of people get wrong, even some of the Loft people, because we have these selective memories that begin to winnow out stuff that doesn't resonate so much for us, and we begin to only see the stuff that resonated. So, you know, I know enough to know that if there's stuff I didn't know he played, then certainly there's stuff that you don't know he played and you don't know he played. So it's better that we all kind of contribute to this whole, you know, conglomerate viewpoint of what maybe David did play. So, I mean, is that, again, I can't give you a lot of insights into David. I can tell you this much. He always had kindness for me, and I never heard a word out of his mouth or saw a reaction from him that indicated a lack of patience, a lack of tolerance. And I'm not saying, I'm not putting him out there as a perfect person. I'm just saying, to at the very least, what he presented to me consistently. And you know, I hounded him incessantly at the DJ booth. You know, what is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? And he always would take the time. He'd tell me what the song was and such. And those few conversations I had with him, wasn't rushing the conversation. He wasn't looking to get out of the conversation. He just took his time and answered my questions and such. And since then, I've watching him speak with other people and do with other people. So, I don't think it's a misconception about David, but it's one I'm willing to repeat. He's a nice guy. You know, he's just a nice guy. And, you know, from that nice person came this beautiful thing. So I say that's
That was great. That was great. David's credited for having a significant influence on dance music and club culture. How was his influence felt at the Loft?
How was his influence felt at the Loft? Well, I mean, a lot of stuff I spoke to about earlier, like that kindness, that supporting other people's fun, that tolerance, and the lack of judgment. Those were all things I came to understand were kind of expected of people who participated in this environment. Now, I'm not sure, maybe they might have put little hints out there in the quarterly mailings we would get each solstice and equinox. Maybe there was something said, but I don't know. I think that by the time I got there, the culture was so well entrenched that it was apparent to me that that was a responsibility of mine, and that other people were doing this all the time there. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Basically, how was
Oh,
David's influence felt at the Loft?
how is it his influence felt? So I mean, so as far as that goes, I believe all of that comes from him and his people from the very beginning, from when he got started. So and not only so we all felt that, and we all kind of learned that there. Some people maybe came with some of that before when they got there, but many of the people I knew at the Loft came from rough neighborhoods. I grew up in the projects, so there was a certain amount of suspicion and hesitance and space that was necessary in order to move comfortably in my environment. And certainly some of my other friends had rougher circumstances. But we put all that aside. Maybe that first time you came, you didn't quite get it. You had a sense something was different, but you didn't necessarily like go with that ghetto stuff right away. But for many people, if not most people who came there on a regular basis, I believe it changed them. That the Loft changed them, and that since the Loft was driven by David and his people and the culture they brought from the very beginning, there's an influence for you. Speaking for myself, right around that period in time, 1920 or so, I became a little bit more hungry spiritually. I want a little bit more. I was raised Catholic. The values and the lessons, some of the lessons were great, but some of the values that I was seeing lived by people who were naming themselves as this were really not for me. There were tons of contradictions, and they weren't, for me at least, they weren't ringing true from a spiritual perspective. So even at that relatively young age, even as a teenager, I started to get kind of a bit of a hunger for that. And that happened, right? It corresponded with my time going to the Loft. And I'm not saying that the Loft started that, but it certainly complemented that. And it felt right. It resonated with me in that sense. I grew up in the 60s, and I grew up in the projects. So the racism and the bigotry and the division that existed behind all that was very real for me as a kid. I remember riots. I remember assassinations. I remember hostility, felt towards me also, because I represented something to people who, were beset and oppressed. So, for me to go to a place like the Loft, which is largely people of color, and where we were able to put this stuff down, and all of that distrust and suspicion and all the other stuff that I mentioned that comes when you live in poverty, and stricken areas and such, we're able to put that aside. And that wouldn't have happened unless there was an intent behind it. So, when we talk about influence, like I said, I don't think it necessarily started or kickstarted my spiritual journey through life or anything like that, but it certainly complemented it. And it allowed me to be a little bit more spiritual in this party setting, rather than getting dressed up in a fucking suit and throwing ego and all this other stuff and all this pretense out in other club type settings. Here, I put on my baggies, maybe some capizios, a t-shirt. I sweat, I dance, I have fun, and everyone's really good with me because of that. So that it was pretty awesome in that sense. So spiritually speaking, I'm sure it unquestionably influenced, it lent itself to my spiritual development, and certainly influenced many people, many, like a drop in the water in a pond. I'm sure that was carried to distant shores, touched other people. So, very important in that sense. I truly believe that, well, clearly it was more than just a party. I believe it was a spiritually, to some extent still is, a spiritually important entity, the community and everything else that goes behind it. So there's that. Then, of course, there's, how did David and his party influence other parties? I've been to other parties since then that clearly I see the DNA. I see what they're doing, like body and soul.
Give us examples. Give us examples.
perfect example would be Body and Soul. They went out of their way to make sure that they connected with people and that they were part of the community and they were showing love to people on a regular basis. You know, the music they played was different than other stuff and had a spiritual bent to it, a spiritual tip to it often. So and there's a little bit of carryover internally as far as the people helping to put that together, but also people carried over from the old, you know, loft and garage scene and stuff like that, and immediately felt the resonance in what was going on there. Different, I wouldn't say they were the loft, but you could see the DNA. You could see that it was bred into that. You know, and you know, I continued after I left. So yeah, I spent almost all my time at the loft as far as going out at night. Over those years, I maybe about 5 times a year, I go to the garage. And you know, I'll just compare those two, by the way. They were related to each other. They were cousins, but the garage and the loft were drastically different experiences. It's much bigger. It was much louder. It was more of a something a little more sensational about the garage, partially because of the size, partially because of the sound. They also had they had a film theater, they, you know, and all the decorations and stuff like that. And I think people behaved a little different there. They were kind of wild. They were really into it. They loved it. For many of the garage heads, I would say that they definitely considered it a spiritual experience, but it was a different one, I believe. I think it was I think the intimacy and it was just simply the intimacy of the loft allowed for a different kind of spiritual experience. I'll just put it that way. Without trying to classify it too much. It was certainly a different spiritual experience in the garage. And then musically, you know, how did David influence people? To this day, I know people who are out there spinning records who heard this record first at the loft, that record first at the loft, this record there at the loft. So not only has it infected their catalogs and the things that they play for other people, but for some people, like for instance, for myself, as far as the content goes, prior to getting to the loft, most of the dance music I was familiar with was more commercial. It was a little bit less cerebral. It was maybe a little bit derivative of what was out there at that point in time. And I thought that's what was necessary, that I had to play this standard stock of dance music in order to get people to dance. And I go to the loft, he's dropping like Squib Cakes by the Tower of Power and Matzo City by Steve Miller and Hit Me With Your Rhythm Sticks by Ian Dury and the Blockhead. And, you know, just playing like, you know, stuff by the Tom Tom Club. And I would never, ever, ever have thought that I could really stretch out like that and play that kind of stuff for people and they would enjoy it. And in the end, it's about right energy, right moment, good music. You should be okay. A private conversation I had with David once, and at some point in the conversation, I asked him straight up, I was like, well, how do you determine what music is best to play at the loft? And he didn't take long to answer the question. He basically told me, he exactly told me, good music that's good to dance to. That was it. And so what I took away from that, and what a lot of other people who first started hearing, you know, people, you know, David selecting music as their first introduction. So for me, that's been my credo from then moving forward. Good music that's good to dance to, and you know, and now more so than ever, you no borders, no boundaries. David would pull shit out from like the other side of the fucking of the globe and play it for us, and we'd love it. He'd pull something out from the past and play it for us, and we'd love it. He, you know, like a fisherman, he went out there and he found a lot of this music. It wasn't just dropped on his lap. He didn't hear it on the radio. There was some of it that was straight up, you know, classic dance music and stuff like that. And of course, he drew from that big pool of music also, but he also would just come up with stuff that we weren't ready for. So, you know, that whole no borders, no boundaries thing opened up stuff for some selectors, some musical hosts. It empowered them to reach a little farther, to be a little bit broader in their thinking as far as what they could play for people. And as a result, dancers have heard better music. Dancers have heard music they never would have heard otherwise, because you've got someone who's adventurous, and somewhere along the line, a lot of people got that because of that history of David playing and other people following behind him playing and such. So he's had a pretty extensive experience on people musically, and you know as well as I do, of course, there are people all over the world who are inspired by what he did there and what he put forth and what he presented to people.
Were there guest DJs at the Loft?
Not per se. Did other people spin records? Yeah, but as I recall, I think there might have been like one night that somebody like maybe had to step in for some reason or stuff like that. But for the most part, people would play very brief sets, a few records. David was typically right back on it again. I remember seeing Francois play there. I remember Steve Travolta spinning one night, Nicky Ciano. There might have been some other people. Of course, I was down in the basement most of the time, so I wouldn't have seen people step in and step out. But it's not like I would get a notice of the upcoming season and in there would be, oh, so and so will be here on such and such a date, or that person will be here on such and such a date. If anything, I'm sure they just considered themselves blessed to be able to drop a few discs there for whatever reason David had them fill in. Doug would play a record here and there. Doug Sherman. So like when I think of people with a legacy there, I think of him. I remember almost from the time I got there, Doug was there, and already soon after he got there, he was David's record caddy and pitching in and being an assistant there and stuff. Of course he's the balloon magician or the balloon whisperer. He'd show up early, do the work, and help out, and so. Yeah, no, I don't remember guest DJs very often. And
were there any particular memories or moments that stood out at the Loft for you? Particular night or a particular set or a particular... It's like, oh, I'll never forget that day.
It's very difficult because each of those nights were so special, each of them, that
No, I totally get it. Let's pivot to something else.
Really, but that's something though, dude, that the experience would be so special each night consistently that nothing really stands. I mean, there were celebrity guests here and there. I remember Mick Jagger showed up one night, just walked up to the front desk. He has to ask if he can come into the party. I remember Eddie Murphy in his red leather outfit showed up. I'm sure he felt like a fool. Someone said, "Oh, we're going out to a club," and he said, "Oh, let me get my red leather outfit on," and he gets to the Loft, and everybody's in parachute pants and overall baggies and t-shirts and such. And I don't know that he even danced. He hung out near the DJ booth most of the night there. I'm I'm just trying to reach in there and think about if anything. Yeah, no, man. Every night was so incredibly good that there was never one night that really could have stood heads and shoulders above that. I could tell you about a couple of nights that I had at the Paradise Garage, like the night Shaka sang there drunk off her ass and almost fell off the stage. Or the night who else? Nona Hendrix came, and Tom Tom Club came with her and backed her up while she was singing and stuff like that. Fred Snyder was telling me how great a dancer I was at that point in time. I was a little, so my ghetto self got in there, so I was a little suspicious of why this guy, who I didn't even know who he was at the moment, was admiring me so much and admiring my dancing. And for all I know, he might have wanted me for a video. But he was there tonight also. I can remember the first time I heard them play Weekend at the Paradise Garage. And Larry just kept on fucking working that beginning of the song over and over again. And the crowd was going freaking nuts, and then dropped the fucking song on people. And it was like, the place just exploded. So it's easier for me to pick out standout nights at the garage more so than it is for me to do so at the Loft, where I have infinitely more experience.
Let's pivot to talk about the sense of community at the Loft. How did it foster relationships? What kind of relationships, friendships, or relationships were made at the Loft?
The sense of community. So the Loft is not David Mancuso. The Loft is not a catalog of music that was played at Loft parties. The Loft is very much the community. It was the community when I showed up, and it's still the community today. By all means, we were there to hear David play music. We were there to have a party, no question about it. But if that community, if that family didn't exist in the very beginning, I'm not sure if I would have came away from that experience with the same enthusiasm and compulsion to be part thereof. So when I first got there, like I said, I was introduced to it by a friend of mine from the neighborhood who had a small circle of friends. He had his circle of friends and people he dealt with, and he had been going there for a little while, so he knew a decent amount of people. That provided me some entry to a set group of people. Didn't make me a friend. It provided me entry. But once those people saw me showing up, taking part in, acting like I was part of the family and such, they embraced me and took me into that, their circles. And so I got good friends out of it, who I'm still friends with today. But at the same time, the community in the form of the people who were working there, helping to stage the whole thing. And again, these are people who came with that heritage from Broadway, well before they had gotten to Prince Street. So the community was already well on its way to being a healthy and positive organism before I even got there. And before it even hit Prince Street, probably. So now this is something that was germinated in these humble parties, these listening parties that David was doing at his house, where he was inviting people and providing a safe environment for them, having a loving, exciting experience. They just nurtured it and kept it healthy long enough that it was able to grow organically and carry over. And so by the time they got to Mercer Street, that sense of community, that 60s, peace and love vibe, was real, and it carried over, and it was infectious. So as I said, many of the people I know of, and most of the people who I saw there, were people from more of an urban culture. So, if you grew up in New York in the 60s and 70s, it would be in your best interest to have a bit of a hard edge. And we were allowed to put that aside and to enjoy this safe space. So I think what happened is that for people who've been through that, I don't know if it's the same for people who experience it once and like, wow, that loft was amazing, as it is for people who went on a regular basis. And of course had the same experience. Wow, the loft is amazing. I don't know what the takeaway would be there. You know, I'm not sure, how they perceive the community. For them, maybe they're looking at it from a distance and saying, boy, that community looks cool. But I don't know if they necessarily get the feel for it. I went to a party recently, which was all Loft people. And we're just so happy for each other, and we just want each other to be happy and to be good. Not a lot of petty shit amongst the people I've dealt with in the Loft. Not a lot of petty stuff. It's very hard to keep that kind of stuff out of relationships. So, but that community is still out there. The community now, of course, is, again, as some people know, it's like kind of worldwide now. David visited Japan quite a bit and inspired people over there. And there were people who came over to the United States and had a chance to meet with him and maybe even experience the loft back then. And so I think, again, it's infectious. I think some of what we walked away from that experience with is out there in the world and spreading to others. So the community is actually, a heck of a lot bigger than what we have here in New York City.
Super helpful. And then last question, very, very controversial question. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Would the loft work today?
Yes. I can't believe
you said that without even blinking.
I cannot believe that's a controversial question. It would unquestionably work today. But let me ask you a question. Well, what do you mean work? Like, would people be able to gather and so if it's going to work, what we're saying is it's got to be something created in the same form, same intent, and with the same energy and spiritual stuff behind it. Yeah, of course it would. Can you get to that point? Can you go through a period of time where you're able to consistently stage parties and host safe, loving environment for people to come in and hear the special music and to have these religious experiences? You might be able, it's a lot easier to stage one event. But the way he started, which is small, organic, natural, friends, it just grew to be more and more friends, and it got to that place. So could it happen? Yeah, sure it could. I don't think it necessarily even has to start the same way or go the same route. But all the things that I found appealing and that compelled me to be a part of that scene are all things that people, they're universal. People love good music, right? People like to dance. People want to have fun. People want to feel safe. People want to feel loved. They want to feel tolerated, respected, stuff like that. And if you can get an environment where that can happen, I think, yeah, it could come off. Mind you, David didn't start as some icon. David was a hippie with a yearning for a good sound system and a desire to create a space for his friends where they could listen to music and enjoy themselves, move if necessary. So I don't think, you have to be some big name selector in order to make it happen or anything like that. I think, you just have to, it has to go through the process, man. It has to grow. So, if the question is, could it work? Yes, it could work. But it's not like an instant oatmeal where you boil the water for a few minutes, pour it into this package, and it's going to happen. You have to be willing to accept the fact that this is something that it grew naturally, and it came to be what it is over time. But I truly do believe what I took away from that place is definitely universal. Today, tomorrow, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, people do want to hear good music. And I don't understand why would some people suggest, and let me ask you that question, why do some people suggest that maybe something like that couldn't work or shouldn't work?
Well, the feedback that I get is that New York has changed. Entertainment options have changed. Now people have apps, they have internet, they have dating apps, they have whatever. So a lot of social has moved online. That's one. The culture has changed. Nightlife isn't always about purity and dancing. Now it's about, and probably back then too, about the bar, about the guest list, about the VIP, about hands in the air, about cell phones recording it. Those are some of the reasons why I hear that it might not work today because of how society is today.
I would counter that by saying that what's behind all the stuff you just discussed, all of what was behind that existed back then also in the nightclub scene. There were people going out to parties looking for stuff other than what they were going to find at the Loft. You weren't going to find someone who's going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you you're the best thing in the world because you showed up in such and such an outfit, or you're exposing this much of your body, or you're displaying this much money. That wasn't going to happen. You weren't going to get that at the Loft. The Loft, there were almost no mirrors at the Loft. Like literally, I vaguely recall a little tiny mirror in the men's room. But other clubs I would go to, you walk through and there'd be a whole bank of mirrors here, mirrors over here, mirrors outside the restrooms. So there's always an opportunity for you to see, how do I look? There's always a whole bunch of stuff that made you think about the exterior, external stuff, and not about just the dance, just the music, just to feel the music, not even to analyze the music, just to let yourself go and just feel the music and cut loose. Even back then, you could have gone to 99 other spots and found the kind of freedom that we experienced at the Loft to be a weird thing that was looked upon, looked down upon. I can remember back then showing up at a spot and going off. And then I hear somebody on the side saying, what the fuck is this guy doing? Whereas, if I'm at the Loft, I'm surrounded by people who are fucking dancers. Not people who just happen to be dancing, but like Monday through Friday, they'd be out taking classes and studying their, I used to, for the record, maybe after the first 6 months at the Loft, I'm going 3-4 days a week to dance classes. Up there around like 57th Street and Broadway, up where all the dance schools are and stuff like that. Like Hines and Hatchet, which was owned by Gregory Hines' brother and somebody else, took classes there, the Broadway Dance Center and stuff like that. So, and I was small change. There were other people there who were very serious dancers. People talk about the Loft dance style. I see ballerinas there. I see modern dancers there. I see all different types of like people who were clearly professionals doing their thing. So it really was dance first, not be seen, which is really what we're talking about in today's culture. This whole thing where they want to be seen, or they want to watch, or they want to, I want to record this so I can show all my friends and how important I am because I was at this particular party with their phones and whatnot. It's not really it's not about the dance and it's not about the music. And I do think there are people who are about the dance and about the music. If I'm not mistaken, there's still tons of dance schools out there, right? So people are still studying dance. People are still passionate about dance. I do think, on the other hand, that promoters, that people who stage entertainment events, who bring in DJs and such, their priority is not necessarily just the music and the dance and the joy and happiness of the dancers. Their priorities are the bar has to make money, or you know, it's not about the music and dance, it's about a name. So we have to bring in such and such a names to make this happen, or we have to do this. So they're, you know, the people who are promoting parties and staging some, not every single person, mind you, I don't want to lump every single person into this category, but they're not driven by the same things that motivated the people behind the Loft. And to some extent, they're not even driven by the stuff that were the people who put together and ran the garage were about, which is more of a commercial enterprise. Okay, still, the garage was thrown with more of a commitment to pure partying, and you know, this experience, not this event, not this, you know what I'm saying? The garage was a dance music experience, a dance and music experience. The Loft was a dancing and music experience. But you know, you go to a concert where they have 5 DJ sets in a row, or many of these other parties that are out there right now, it's not the music and dance experience. It's to be seen experience, this experience, that experience, and that's what a lot of these people are selling. So I think there's a place for both of them. Right? I think there's a place for arena events with DJs where people just stand in front with their cell phones filming the DJ spinning. I think there's a place for that. You know, it's all good. I think there's a place for people who want to be seen and, you know, want to be about show. There's a place for them to go out and do that stuff too. So I don't know, man. I at the moment, I don't think there is a party like the Loft, though. I think Body and Soul kind of captured that a bit. Body and Soul had a nice run. What are we talking about? 5-6 years at least. So could something like that succeed in the quote unquote modern era? Yeah. Just, you know, it has to be put together right. And even in Body and Soul, did you? I'm assuming, did you go to Body and Soul?
I did. I wasn't a regular every week, but I did go. It was a fantastic party.
Yeah, I wasn't a regular either. I'd say I would go occasionally and stuff. It grew. I remember the early parties. The early parties were a little quiet compared to the later ones. So even with that lineup of fantastic DJs, even in the beginning, it wasn't the same success that it became. So you know, you have to be patient. You have to give things time. You have to have the right attitude. You have to have a notion of what you're doing. You know, what's your purpose? What is your purpose? What are you aiming for? Like, you know, some DJs, all DJs are not motivated by the same thing, right? So the people who are spinning the music might be driven for those moments when people go crazy because they've done something special on the turntables and they're being recognized, right? For them, that's the big moment. I'm being recognized for being special here for the way I'm spinning this music right now. Other people, I like to maybe consider myself kind of in this category. It's because I love the music. You know, it's about the love of the music and the love of the dancers. To see the joy and the ecstasy that they're experiencing. So for me to put them together and hopefully have the energy drop at the right moment, that's fantastic. But what I'm taking away from that is not I'm special. What I take away from that moment is this music is fucking special. This music is awesome. And I'm glad that I'm able to share my love and give you an opportunity to love this tune too. So DJs are motivated by different, selectors, musical hosts, whatever, are motivated by different things. And I do believe that, from what little I know of Joe, Francois, and Danny, they've got a great love for the music that they're playing. And to the best of my knowledge, they have an affection for the people they're playing it for too. So when I say to you that party had some of those Loft characteristics, I felt that coming from them. I felt that going back and forth. And people respond to that. And people do respond to that. I don't think you're going to get the same thing when you're doing a body and soul party in the knockdown center, a one-off. There's a whole bunch of the people who are coming didn't develop culture along with the rest of the group and develop this thing. So you can get a lot of people who are interlopers and voyeurs and stuff like that. So maybe it wouldn't necessarily work out the same way, but given the opportunity to have a regular space with a good sound system and having loving and people who are really invested emotionally in the scene and stuff like that, I think you could manifest something that had those Loft characteristics without fail. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Great to talk to you. And it's great to catch up. It's been a while. So have a good night.
You too, man. Take care.
All right. Take care.